That is nice and tender. Hey folks, so I thought today we'd do something simple. We're going to do a very simple cheesesteak sandwich. Now keep in mind this is not a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, and this is a kind of an experiment that I'm doing to see how I can combine different techniques to get the optimal cheesesteak sandwich. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to use a flank steak. I'm going to marinate it with a little bit of a Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper, and I'm going to add baking powder and egg white. So this is a technique that's used in Chinese cuisine, and it's used to tenderize the beef. So I'm going to try and use the same technique but with the Western spices. That's just salt, pepper and Worcestershire sauce and garlic a little bit, and see how that works out for the whole steak. So let's get started. So I've got here a nice flank steak. I kind of trimmed off most of the fat. You want a little bit of fat to remain. If you've seen a cheesesteak sandwich, it's supposed to be nice and thin, almost shaved beef. What I'm doing is I'm cutting it against the grain. So this will automatically break up into smaller pieces too. And we're going to try and keep it as thin as we can. Now, this one isn't frozen, but if you want an easier steak to cut, it's nice to freeze it beforehand. So just put it in the freezer for say about half an hour till it gets to a nice firm state. But you don't have to. As you can see here, it's not too difficult to do it without the freezer. And the idea here is just to get it nice and thin as possible so that you get that beefy flavor and it cooks really fast, but at the same time it's almost well done when it's done, because most people who have a steak sandwich want the meat well done. Of course, if you're going gourmet and you want to have it medium rare, then you can just the steak as a whole and then slice it and just put in the sandwich at the end. As usual, the full recipe is going to be in the description, and you can use the same ratios to make it smaller or bigger as you would like. For the marination, we're going to use a little salt, pepper to taste, we're going to go in with a little bit of garlic powder, and then we're going to break an egg in there. So we're just going to get in there with our hands, break that egg, and just make sure it's evenly coated with everything. The theory is that the baking powder tends to break down the structure of the meat while helping it retain the moisture. So it cooks faster and remains more tender. Oh, I forgot to add the Worcestershire sauce, or like one of my old colleagues used to say, wash your ass in the sour sauce. That's just going to give it a little bit more umami, enhance the beef flavor. So while the beef's marinating, we're going to let it marinate for about half an hour. That's the recommended time. I'm going to start slicing some of the vegetables that are going in. So I'm going to use some onions. And what we're going to do is we're just going to slice them with the grain, because we want that bite from the onion, but at the same time it should be like not caramelized but softened. And like I said, we're going to cut with the grain, so that's how we do it. So what we're doing here is we're going to keep it fairly thick, so it's not fine. The reason being, if you cut it fine, it's probably going to disintegrate when you cook it on high heat, and that's not what you want. You want some bite from the onion. Now, one thing, like I said before also, is that you need a sharp knife. You'll notice that I'm not tearing up, and one of the main reasons is that I have a sharp knife. So when you have a sharp knife and you're cutting onions, it tends to cut through the glands, I guess, of the onion. So the sulfur, which causes your eyes to burn, is not released. And that's why if you have a sharp knife, you won't cry for the first few minutes at least. But then once the onion's sitting for a while, it tends to release the sulfur and then you start getting that burning sensation. So I'm going to do strips with the pepper as well. Now I'm using a yellow bell pepper because that's what I had. You can feel free to use green or red, whatever you prefer. So that's going to be the vegetables that go into the cheesesteak sandwich. Okay, so we're going to start frying up the thing. It's been about half an hour that it's been marinated. What I'm going to do is just heat the pan on a medium to high flame. It's going to happen really fast because we wanted to go sear and then add the onions and just let them soften a bit and then we're done. You put some oil in the pan and let it heat up nicely. So you see the oil is moving freely. That means it's pretty hot. But is it hot enough? And if you look at the edges here, you can see that the oil is starting to flow backwards. So that means it's hot enough. I like to keep the beef at about room temperature as far as possible. So that way it can cook faster. Now that we've got the beef in there, searing a bit, I'm going to add some onions in there. And some peppers. Now for the most part, this beef is going to be searing itself and doing pretty okay. You can just toss it in the pan, but like you saw, it's going to end up a little bit all over the place. Or you can just keep stirring it. The idea is not to keep it resting in one place. Keep moving it forward and backward. You want to get the onion softened at the same time that the beef cooks. So that way it's not either rare nor overdone. This is the plate and there you go. Nice juicy beef. So we're going to use these rolls for toasting. I just bought some small hot dog rolls. And what I'm going to do is just going to toast them a bit. Put them on the pan. And I'm going to put in a little bit of butter. Butter is soft enough to actually butter the bread, so let's do that. Alright, so we have the bun here. You can see a little bit of browning on the bun. That's what we wanted. I'm going to load it up with some of the beef and the onion. Let's get a few peppers in there as well. It's a really small bun. I just bought these as trials. So we're going to have the bun. And some people like to melt the cheese on the grill itself. But I find that works with like processed cheese. But if you're using something natural like I am right now, which is Gruyère, it kind of works better if you let it melt on the bun. And we're just going to cover that up, let it melt for a bit before we eat it. So for those of you who've not met her, this here is Jasmine. She's always open.